Please, 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 college football. Can we finally have a season in which the SEC is not the best conference in all of college football? Can we finally get there? Is it going to happen ever? Welcome in where it just means more. It's the SEC and it's our predictions here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all stopping by. We know that your time is valuable. We try to make the best of it with the very finest in discussion, debate, and analysis right here at the Voice of College Football. We will drop the link in the chat. And of course, you can call me and talk SEC football as we unveil our predictions for 2023. And it should be a good time because we've got some selections that may surprise you to a certain extent. And of course, we basically spare no expense, I should say. We spare no expense. We had the set designer come in and rearrange the helmets today. Took about 4.5 hours. Yes. So be thankful for that. Appreciate you all being here. Let's get to the comments. I sometimes skip on the comments and then I go back and I see there were some fun comments out there. As was pointed out to me today on a number of social media platforms, and it's the same every day. There are lunatics who root for college football. They really don't know what they're talking about, but that's fun. That's okay. That's quite all right. If you're going to get it wrong in life at some point, somewhere in some category, get it wrong in college football. Have that be the one that you're delusional in. Not something important. All right. Let's take it from the top and then we'll unveil our predictions. Of course, you can subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. If you're joining us for a first time, hey, just soak it in. We don't ask that you subscribe. You'll want to subscribe if you enjoy college football. And also keep in mind that SEC football fans, we've got a new SEC channel that we've launched. And so right now we're simulcasting on the national channel, Alabama channel, Florida channel, and the SEC channel. I don't believe any other channels, possibly the LSU channel as well. Maybe not. Maybe just those channels. I think at this point, we've had a restructuring. We posted a video outlining the restructuring of the channels. And so SG1 Sports taking over some of those channels so you can follow them and what they do over there. Voice of College Football folks, for our content, that's all going to be on the national channel and on the SEC channel for the SEC. And we're actually producing more SEC content than pretty much we ever have. So check out what we have delivered and posted here in the last 3 weeks. From the top, Mike, Mickey Mouse Conference. Mickey Mouse, get it. Disney, got it. Yes. On the downward spiral. I know you're hoping for this, Mike. Let's see some evidence of it first. Let's see a little bit of evidence. Downward spiral. That's kind of dramatic. Maybe not a slight decline, anything like that. College football really needs the SEC to go through a major tailspin for much to change in this sport. It's just been completely dominated by the SEC. Sometimes I know that gets overstated by SEC fans. And from time to time, when it gets to be a little ridiculous and a little over the top, I have to rein in those super SEC fans and point out some of the shortcomings of the conference and put it into context at times. But let's make no mistake about it. Number one, the SEC is number one, and it's not debatable. I wish it was. That would have been so great this offseason to actually debate best conference. But we've not been able to do that for roughly 15 years, maybe more. This offseason, my goal, my wish, I should say, it's more of a wish than a goal. I can't do anything about it. So it's not my goal. I've got nothing to do with it. But my wish for this channel, besides a lot of other wishes that are more important, but my wish for our interactions would be that we can truly have a debate about best conference. But we can't. No buzz to it. I don't know what that means, no buzz to it, because, of course, there's plenty of buzz because more people watch SEC football per game than even the Big Ten. It's Georgia and Bama, and that's it. Well, that's not true. They try to push teams like Tennessee, and then they get embarrassed on Natty TV. So, Mike, we appreciate you being here. You know that. You've been here for a long time, but that's a ridiculous statement. And I shouldn't even have to explain, but of course I will because that's my job. Tennessee gets embarrassed on national TV like they did against the ACC champion Clemson, the team that won 9 consecutive games in the ACC, that has owned the ACC for 10 years, and Tennessee beat them by 3 scores in the Orange Bowl. That's getting embarrassed on national TV. Who embarrassed Tennessee on national TV? This is always the issue with just about anybody who slams the SEC. You know what the issue is? They always use times in which the SEC got embarrassed by another SEC team. So who embarrassed Tennessee? Oh, South Carolina. South Carolina embarrassed Tennessee. Trouble is, South Carolina, see, they also play in the SEC. When you look at the wins and losses, we'll take the losses into consideration as well, of the SEC in 2022 versus the rest of college football outside the conference. It's just, man, it's not even close. It's not even close. This conference beat Ohio State. This conference beat Utah and Oregon and Texas. And who else? If we look at all the winning record bowl teams, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Utah. Who am I missing? Clemson twice. Clemson twice. Yeah, Pitt. Good Pitt team. Yeah, just a lot of wins there. Illinois. Good win there for the conference. Just too many wins. BYU. Embarrassing losses for the SEC last year. I would say Arkansas losing to Liberty. That shouldn't happen. That's not an embarrassing loss. Liberty was a good, solid football team and have been for the last 4 or 5 years. But the SEC and SEC mid-tier team should not lose to Liberty. Besides that, yeah, Florida got embarrassed in the whatever bowl in California by Oregon State 30-3. Embarrassing loss. That's an embarrassing loss. Yeah, that shouldn't happen. That's just not showing up for the game, getting completely obliterated, annihilated, dominated. Other than that, yeah, South Carolina lost a really good bowl game against Notre Dame, but that's no embarrassment. Every conference is going to lose games. You can't win every game, but to lose by a touchdown to another 8-4 team as an 8-4 team, I do not consider that any kind of black mark against the SEC. So that's pretty much it. Texas A&M lost to App State. Bad loss for Texas A&M and the SEC, but that's nowhere close to the other conferences. Best conference in America, and I would love to have this debate in 5 months from now. 5 months from now, can we please have a debate about best conference in college football? That's what I want. Todd, good to see you as well. Folks, we only have about 40 people on the line. Some people didn't get the word SEC predictions here at the Voice of College Football. And I still want to deliver what I was asked by David Greenshield, one of our faithful callers, to deliver, and that would be my prediction record throughout the years, which I'll just throw it out there. We'll put it into context. You can say whether it's amazing or it's horrible. It's actually really good. It's not the best in the business. I don't take the time to make it the best in the business. Maybe it could be. Maybe at one time it was when I put a little bit more time into it. But my week-to-week predictions will be, we're going to make an announcement in regards to where my predictions will be available this season. But certainly some will be on Patreon, as that has been the case for the past 2 or 3 years. Todd does not give a crap about conferences. A lot of people don't. That's fine. This is kind of the way to go through the predictions, though, because they actually play in conferences. So that's what we do there. Alabama Tide, surprisingly, saying that Alabama is going to run through people this year. And I got to say, there's a few teams specifically in the SEC that I struggled with a little bit And the team that I struggled with more than any would be Alabama. Because I've got a certain perspective and a certain mindset on everyone, how good they are, how good they were last year. It's a simple process, but the result is difficult to get the predictions right. Because right out of the gate, think about this, that the process is pretty cut and dry. You take last year's team, and basically I look at last year's season for every particular team and say, okay, they were 9-3, but were they really a little bit better than that and lost some close games, or worse than that? Okay. Were they a 9-3 football team? Okay. How much did they lose? How much did they gain? And then do I believe that this schedule is going to weigh them down or lift them up a little bit? Think Oklahoma. Lift up Oklahoma, maybe weigh down somebody like Arkansas. Todd says, I wish the SEC and the Big Ten would have every team play one out-of-conference game with each other. Would be exciting games to watch. Yeah, many people have suggested that through the years, to have a basketball type week-to-week situation. What do they call that? The ACC Big Ten Challenge. Do that. Have everybody play in 1 week. That'd be fun. That'd be cool. I don't think that that's necessarily fair or equitable, but it would give us a lot more games to rank and evaluate these teams on. Yeah, so based on last year's standings, we would have between the SEC and the Big Ten, we would have Georgia, Michigan, LSU, Ohio State, Penn State, Alabama. Then I guess we'd have Tennessee, and I know people are going to squabble. Tennessee was in front of Alabama. They won. Okay, we're not going to do this exactly down to the T. Something like Alabama, Penn State, or Tennessee, Penn State, and then Alabama or Tennessee against. Then it drops. It would have been last year Purdue. Yikes. Okay, there's a drop off for the Big Ten. And then after that, you would have, okay, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can just size them up 1 through 14. Who would play who? Down at the bottom, Northwestern and Vanderbilt, and work your way up. And the SEC is just deeper in terms of quality teams, and then deeper in terms of just decent teams that are capable in any such way. Tell your friends and family that we're here talking SEC for the next couple hours right here at the Voice of College Football. Get the word out there on social media. Consider this. There are folks out there that have no idea. Can you believe there are people that live in this world that have no idea that we're here delivering the best in college football analysis every day, thanks to you? Dropping off some folks at the pool. Or just getting out of the shower, maybe. Bootzilla. Alabama Tide's got Georgia and Bama in the playoffs. Think we've seen that before. Then we got Ben, Exploring with Ben. And keep in mind, Exploring with Ben, they're going to have a weekly Oregon show. Time to be announced, day and time to be announced. And an Oregon live postgame show. Of course, our Ducks postgame live show with Ben and the crew. They're on the Oregon channel. Rowan's hot in Arkansas. It's like perfect here. Todd Gwynn chiming in here. There we go. Todd, we appreciate that super chat contribution. Todd says, Mark, great chat with the West Virginia senator. So if you missed it earlier today, we posted our conversation with West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. He and Tommy Tuberville have put together some legislation concerning NIL. And you'll be able to read between the lines. I didn't have a whole lot of time with the senator to really debate him or raise some big questions. So I basically read through the bullet points of all the legislation, and I wanted to hit what I felt was important, get his response, And that's about all we had time for. I made it known that there was one portion of it that I didn't necessarily agree with. I understand the concept. I understand the incentive, the intent, which actually I think is good for college football. I just don't think it flies based on individual freedoms. And then other than that, I thought it made a lot of sense. Mike says that Iowa's better than Tennessee. Last year, Iowa better than Tennessee. Iowa, the team that lost to Nebraska. Iowa, the team that couldn't score against anybody. Iowa, come on. Come on, Mike. Iowa was about the 30th best team in the country last year, and Tennessee was one of the 5 or 6 or 7 best teams in the country. Not close. This year, maybe I would expect Tennessee's not going to be quite as good, and Iowa's going to be a little bit better based on their quarterbacking situation more than anything. Rowan says the Big Ten had more first and second rounders this past season, I think. Yes. Yeah, for the first time in forever. The SEC still had more NFL draft selections than any conference with a good margin by 7 or 8 or 9 than any conference from rounds 1 through 7 or 1 through 6, I guess it is now. 1 through 6? 1 through 7. 1 through 6. 1 through 7. Yeah, so that was a nice look for the Big Ten to have, I believe, 2 more first and second rounders. I believe they tied in the first round, or maybe the SEC had 1 more in the first round. Obviously, that's a very minute statistic. It's a very specific metric that means something. It means something. Felipe believes that Alabama is going undefeated. I would like to know if Felipe is an Alabama fan. Troy V says, I think the Big Ten shortens the quality depth next year with expansion. And really, Troy, that's what was going through my head when I was going through that whole thing about best conference and the SEC's out there and nobody's close. I don't believe that the expansion, the realignment that we see with the 4 teams added to the Big Ten and the 2 to the SEC is going to quite catch up the Big Ten overall to the SEC. But in terms of what most of you pay attention to, which are going to be college football playoff appearances and games and like really high ranking records, you're not going to be comparing 7 and 5 teams. That's like up to me to do. Most of you don't do it. Some of you do. But, there's not going to be an argument out there, who's got the worst team in the conference. So to your point, the elite, if that's what you want to call it, the very good of the Big Ten may have a better shot. They should have a better shot going forward, adding 4 quality programs, 3 for sure. UCLA got to step it up versus 2. And we can go into all the intricacies of how good any of those particular programs could be. To rank them based on ceiling, Troy, I would go USC number 1, Texas 2, Oklahoma 3. Oregon and Washington are pretty much tied for 4th, and then UCLA 6th. In terms of ceiling. In terms of what I'm confident that they will do, well, over the last 20 years, you would say that Oklahoma's been number 1. They've been the most consistent by far of any of those schools. Oklahoma's been number 1. USC, based on the Pete Carroll years, number 2. Oregon, pushing USC between 2 and 3. Then Washington, then Texas, then UCLA. Kind Sir 007 likes Florida State to defeat LSU in week 1. That would certainly not surprise me. Point spread right now at between 2 and 3 for LSU. I'm leaning LSU, but my would-be prediction got a bit of bad news yesterday when it was announced that Mason Smith, just a remarkable player. When I say player, I mean potential star. Hasn't really proven it yet, but Mason Smith suspended for game number 1. And that pretty much brings us to the rest of the comments. All right, folks, here we go. Let's ready to roll, and we will throw out the link if anyone wants to call the show. All right, so the SEC Eastern Division looks like this. Yes, Georgia will be an overwhelming favorite unless things change. Will be an overwhelming favorite in every game they play. But I've got them losing a regular season game in the SEC. Tennessee goes 5-3 in the conference, as does Kentucky, as does South Carolina. South Carolina's got the North Carolina and Clemson games out of conference. I like Kentucky to bounce back a bit. They were 7-5 last year, 7-6 with a bowl loss to Iowa. Of course, Tennessee had the big year at 11-2. So 2 game differences for Kentucky and Tennessee to a certain extent. Florida, I've been down on Florida to a certain extent, like most people have in this offseason, but I'm starting to come around to Florida possibly pulling off some upsets. I've seen some records out there as bad as 2-10 for Florida because their schedule is one of the toughest in the country. But Graham Mertz at quarterback, fresh start, certainly has the ability and is supported by one of the best running games and tandems in the country with Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne. The defense has just been horrible at Florida. And if you could say anything about Florida through this championship dry spell since Urban Meyer left, is that at least under Jim McElwain and Will Muschamp, that the Florida defense still, they recruited great talent, still a great secondaries, just tremendous defensive play across the board. And it's been bad, since Dan Mullen gave up on recruiting. So their top 5 tacklers are gone from a bad defense. Now they do have some excellent guys in the secondary. Jason Marshall's an exceptional player. Kamari Wilson was a top recruit. Shamar James could turn out to be a star. And I'll continue to talk about the SEC Eastern Division as you look at the SEC Western Division predictions. Georgia, Carson Beck, of course, takes over at quarterback. Is he going to play as well as Stetson Bennett? Statistically, maybe. But Stetson Bennett will never, I'm convinced, will never get the credit that he deserves. Like, he's a legend. Like, people have been dissing him all the way up until winning another national championship. People have just been dissing Stetson Bennett just because we have this thing about 5 stars and you got to look the part and you got to be a certain height. And the dude's just a baller and a gamer and an all-time great. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of college football. Now, I'm not saying he's one of the 5 best. I'm talking like top 20, 25. And that means statistically too. So Stetson Bennett is going to be missed by Georgia, but Carson Beck should be fine. Of course, Georgia, with all the talk surrounding offensive line play at places like Michigan, that won the Joe Moore Award, I guess, this past season. I don't remember. I don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. I think it's silly, but who cares who won the Joe Moore Award? But I think they won it the last 2 years. I know they won it the year before that, but Michigan did not have the best offensive line in the country. Georgia did. Now, Michigan had one of the best. Marius Mims is amazing. Ladd McConkey at wide receivers, an all SEC performer. And of course, Brock Bowers is the best tight end in college football. Branson Robinson, their 3rd running back at Georgia, was hurt this week, and he will miss the season. And he was going to have a bigger role after running for 341 yards and 3 touchdowns last year. Kendall Milton does come back, and Dejon Edwards. Javon Bullard had himself a playoff last year. He was the defensive MVP against both Ohio State and against TCU. And again, we've got Georgia 11-1, 7-1 in the conference. Joe Milton, is he going to be as efficient as Hendon Hooker? Probably not, although that's kind of a byproduct of the Josh Heupel offense. Tennessee's 3 top running backs and 3 top wide receivers are exceptional, even though they lose the Biletnikoff Award winner. And Ramel Keaton's a really good wide receiver, Squirrel White. And of course, I really like Brew McCoy. Finally found a home. The offensive line of Tennessee is a bit thin. Aaron Beasley, Jalen McCullough, 2 experienced defensive players, but that is where the deficit lies between Georgia and Tennessee, obviously, on defense. Kentucky, Will Levis gone, replaced by Devin Leary. The huge season at NC State 2 years ago, 35 touchdowns, 5 picks. Expect Kentucky to boast one of the best wide receiver cores in the SEC and their offensive line to get so much better. And for as much as people beat up on Will Levis, he did not have a good offensive line in front of him. But they bring back 125 starts. And their offensive coordinator, who left to go to the Rams in 2022, Liam Cohen, is back. De'Aaron Jackson on defense. Deon Walker could be an emerging star. Ray Davis, the guy who led Vandy to an upset win against Kentucky, is a 100-yard rusher for the Commodores on that day. 1,000 yards for the season. He's now at Kentucky. All right, this South Carolina team coming off 8-4. Shane Beamer's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. He's got a good thing going at South Carolina. Will they ever reach Georgia's status? It's doubtful, but we've got a 12-team playoff coming next year. And that's what provides just so much hope for a program like South Carolina is a perfect example of the hope that the 12-team playoff brings. Spencer Rattler at quarterback had a pretty poor season until the final stretch run. So he's got to be better. They lose some playmakers with Marshawn Lloyd at running back going to USC, Jaheim Bell to FSU, and Adam Stogner goes to Oklahoma. That's where he came in from through the transfer portal. And of course, the defensive end, Birch, went to Oregon. Antwain Wells caught 68 passes last year. They got a transfer wide receiver from Memphis, Eddie Lewis. The offensive and defensive line play at South Carolina is in question. That's where I think that they're lacking for really making a big move in the SEC. Offensive and defensive line play is good, would be really good in another conference. Nicholas Harbor, big 5-star recruit. How much are they going to utilize Nicholas Harbor at South Carolina as a true freshman? Missouri, you got Brady Cook back at quarterback. He ran for almost 800 yards at the quarterback position, 14 TDs, 7 picks, but he's being challenged by Jake Garcia. But most notably, Sam Horn, the baseball player, not the old baseball player, Red Sox and Orioles fans, but the younger baseball player. I don't know if he's the son of Luther Burden, who was the 5-star wide receiver a couple of years ago to Mizzou, caught 45 last year. But of course, they lose one of the best in the SEC, and Dominic Levet, who went to Georgia. 8 of their top 13 starters at Georgia or at Missouri are back. 8 of their 13 top tacklers, Jalen Carles and Tyron Hopper, 81 and 78 stops last year. Vandy, all right, we got Clark Lee. He called this program the soon-to-be greatest program in college football. Clark Lee did. And we'll take this call in just a second as soon as we clean up on Vandy. Commodores, sorry, I got you going 0-8. I did not expect to pick Vandy to go 0-8 coming off the 2 wins in November last year. But I just think things are going to break wrong for them in a few close games, a couple close games. They're typical 2 close games in the SEC that may break their way. One of them to go 1-7. That's kind of the typical Vandy year. AJ Swan at quarterback, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks. Bronco Mendenhall, protege. Nick Hall's the defensive coordinator and has not much to work with there by SEC standards. All right. Let's take a call here at the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Oh, hey, Mark.
Hello, kind sir. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Can you hear me well?
I gotcha. What's going on?
And I wanted to talk about LSU.
Sure.
Now, I know they're a good team, but I've been seeing a lot of picks where they're the favorite. And they went 9-3 last year, but I don't think it was a pretty 9-3. Like, they had close games at Florida State. And honestly, I think Florida State could have won it by more. Like, I know there was some drop passes by the Florida State receivers. And I know technically it came down to, the last kick of the game, but I feel like Florida State is a much better team than LSU. Like, I know LSU has the athletes better than Florida State, but as a team, Florida State has a better quarterback. I feel like they're more organized than LSU. And Brian Kelly, I don't think like he has the defense yet. I know Harold Perkins is there messing stuff up, but with Mason Smith gone, the corners, I'm not confident on LSU corners.
Yeah, that was not a typical LSU secondary last year. And I don't think that they've necessarily fixed it totally. And that's the big question. But yeah, it's too bad Mason Smith is going to miss this game because that kind of puts me on the spot with a prediction because I was leaning LSU. I probably was going to pull the trigger for LSU, and now they are missing what might be their best defensive player, certainly their second best. But you don't think they're close? You said you don't think it's close.
I wouldn't say I think they're going to be like 7-5. No, I think they're a good 9-3 team, but I don't think they're really going to be competing. I know they beat Bama last year, but to me, it felt more like Bama lost the game than LSU won it. Even though the 2-point conversion, they technically won the game, it still felt like Alabama lost it.
Well, I would say that history would tell us that most coaches going from one program to another and taking over a program that's got a lot of potential, but is down like LSU is, that sometimes takes them a year or two to get it going. So I think what Brian Kelly did last year was, I'm not going to say remarkable. That would be an overstatement, but it was a nice first year.
They also had some struggles at Arkansas too. Like if it wasn't for Harold Perkins, I think they would have lost the Arkansas game as well.
Yes. Yeah. They could have lost that game. And well, let's see the games they lost. Of course, they lost. They got run out of the building against Tennessee in the first half or the second half. Lost the Florida State game. Lost, who am I missing? Texas A&M last game of the year. And that game wasn't really, really close. So, yeah, you make some good points.
And I think Mississippi State is going to be competitive this year. I know a lot of people aren't big on them, but I think they're going to play LSU close.
Oh, I think they will too.
They might have had a lead at half last year, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been like a 7-point lead, but I think Mississippi State is going to be a much better team, and they're going to be competitive.
Well, they don't need to be much better team. They were 9-4 last year.
They won their bowl game last year?
Yes.
Yeah, but it was a pretty good team. I mean, I know they lost Mike Leach, rest in peace. He was a really good person, but I think Mississippi State, they bring back either 18 or 19 starters.
Yeah, a lot of defensive production for Mississippi State coming back.
Yeah, and that Bama game, I really want to see who's going to start who's going to be the starting quarterback for Bama, because I think that game is in Tuscaloosa this year, but I think Bama's going to win it, and I think it's going to be comfortable. Like, I don't want to say that too soon because we don't know their quarterback situation, but I think it's going to be a comfortable win for Bama. Now, I don't have a lot to go on that, but I think Bama's running game is going to be good this year. I know they said the receivers weren't looking good at practice, but I mean, they got 5 stars up and down the receiving room. They should get better as the season goes on. But again, that's an assumption.
Their wide receiver play has been not good for a couple of years now. So Jermaine Burton's a good player, and Ja'Cory Brooks is a talented player. So Alabama could bounce back wide receiver, but that's not been a good spot for them for a couple of years now.
I know Isaiah Bond had some drops last year, but I think he's going to do better this year for Bama because in some key spots, he made some nice catches last year.
Yeah, I do believe that Alabama can win any game. Certainly, they could go 12-0. I would not be surprised one way or the other if Alabama goes 12-0 this season. But this is certainly the worst quarterback situation they've had since Nick Saban's been there.
Yeah.
And I really don't expect it to improve to the point that it meets the standard of Tua, Mac Jones, those guys, Bryce Young. But they just want somebody to make the right decisions and not turn the ball over.
And I'm not going to say LSU is going to lose to Florida, but I think Florida's going to be a better team than a lot of people think. And I know we make fun of Graham Mertz, but I don't think the team's going to really revolve around him. I think they're going to be a very defensive team this year. And that ETN guy, I think they're going to run the ball with him real good this year.
Yes, ETN, Montrell Johnson, 2 good backs for Florida. Yeah, they've been taking a pounding in the offseason. A lot of people don't like them to do much of anything, but I've got them going to a bowl game.
They're going to beat somebody people don't think they're going to beat. Now, I couldn't tell you who, but Florida's going to beat someone you don't expect it to beat.
Well, that would be what? Georgia, LSU, Tennessee. Who else would you not expect them to beat?
Florida State. I don't think they're going to beat Florida State, though.
Sounds like you're high on Florida State.
I'm high, but not enough to pick them over Clemson. I just got to see them beat Clemson before I say they're going to do it.
Right, kind sir. Anything else?
No, Mark. Thank you for taking my call.
Appreciate you being here, man. Have a good one. Great to have everyone here at the Voice of College Football. Our SEC predictions we have unveiled, and much like definitely the Big 12 and the ACC, I've got some work to do now. I still have some work to do. I've made this difficult on myself, but hey, if I think it's going to land this way, it's going to land this way. And that means we're going to do the Big 10 on Friday night. And then that means we're going to do the big wrap up either at the end on Friday. We'll do the Big 10, and then we'll do the college football playoff after the conference championship games and the whole deal, because I've got log jams at the top of the SEC Western Division, the Big 12 second place finisher, and the somewhere in the ACC. Yeah. A tie for second in the ACC, tie for second in the Big 12, and now the SEC. So I'm going to have to figure out who beats who, which will decide who gets the tiebreaker nod. All right, folks. What else we got in the chat? Yeah, Corey, I got to say, Florida has a superior roster to Utah, but Utah can keep it close. Keep it close. Utah, a 7-point favorite at home. They kept it close last year. They probably should have won the game. I couldn't walk away from that game at the time thinking, okay, this team's definitely better than that team. I did not have that impression at the time between Utah and Florida. Now, when the season was all said and done, I believed Utah was a legit top 15 team in the country, and Florida was more like 30, 40. So I thought Utah was a much better team. But on that night, I know there was a winner, Florida, but who was the better team? They were pretty much dead even. Welcome in, David. How are you?
Hi, and how are you? To the man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. So, you previewed the Big 12 already, correct?
Yes.
Last night. By the way, my prediction. I just want to get. By the way, you're going to do all the conferences, and then you're going to come back with your playoff predictions. I believe. What is that? Is that going to be Saturday, or is that going to be Friday, or what's the plan for
That's a good
Mark
question.
Rogers TV?
That means we're doing the Big Ten
Mhm.
on Friday night, and either at the conclusion of the Big Ten, we're going to have to make some playoff decisions,
Okay.
conference championship games, and playoff decisions, or maybe we do a Notre Dame Navy pregame on Saturday. Knock out those predictions. I don't know.
Okay. Well,
I'll have to talk to our planners here, the planning staff at the Voice of College Football, see what they have, the programming staff.
The programming staff, that large programming staff, the head of programming.
Yes.
There, yes. Let me ask you this, Mark. When did you do the Pac-12?
Pac-12 on Monday.
Okay. I want to chime in with my prediction on the Pac-12. I think I already gave you my ACC. I have basically, I think Clemson and Florida State split, and then I think Florida State wins the rematch.
And neither one of them loses to anybody else.
Yeah, well, I think Florida State wins the conference with 2 losses. I think they lose the opener to LSU and then split with Clemson with a very nice 11-2 top 10 kind of team.
Okay.
By the way, I was very much thinking about Florida State as a playoff team. I like Travis. I heard they've had a really good luck in the transfer portal with getting some good prospects. So, I was wavering on them being a playoff team, but I'm going to settle in at a nice 11-2, win the ACC, New Year's Six Bowl. I know your FSU fans probably think they're going to do better than that, but I'm settling in at there. So, just my prediction. I know you picked Clemson to win the conference, but that's where I'm at.
I did not pick Clemson to win the conference.
Oh, okay. You oh no, you did pick Florida State, right?
I did not pick anyone to win the conference. I predicted the conference standings is what I did.
Oh, you picked the records. Okay. So did you had
who did you have? Conference championship game.
Okay.
That's what we're going to do when we wrap it all up.
Oh, okay. So you're going to wrap it up. Okay, that way. Okay. Well, but my bottom line is I have Florida State beating Clemson in the rematch. They lose early in the season, and then they beat them in the rematch. I will say for the Pac, I've got Washington over USC. By the way, I do have an interesting question about that, though. Washington did lose its running back, though, to injury. Did you see that?
I did.
I wonder how much that's going to factor in to the season this year for Washington, because I'm big on Washington. I like Penix. I like their passing game. I think they're going to be strong at wide receiver.
And also that getting back to the Florida State LSU matchup, that Florida State lost, or LSU lost Mason Smith, arguably, I would argue it against, but LSU people would tell you that he's their best defensive player.
Really?
So he's been suspended for the first game.
Okay. I still have LSU winning that game, although I think it's going to be a really good one. If it's anything like last year's, then wow. But I have LSU winning that one, so I have that as one of Florida State's 2 losses, which is why I don't have them making the playoff.
Yeah, I'm looking at Washington's rushing stats here. So Wayne Talapapa, he was a Virginia transfer. He moved on, so he's gone. It is Cam Davis that you're talking about, who has been knocked out for the season, who ran for about 500 yards and 13 touchdowns. And so they're down to Richard Newton. I have seen him play, and I don't know if they got in any transfers. I don't believe so. So they could be a bit thin at running back. Oh, Dylan Johnson. Dylan Johnson's a pretty good back. They got him from Mississippi State. Catches a lot of passes.
See, I just think Penix is gonna. I think he's gonna have the best year of any. I think
You
he's the
love
all.
Penix.
I'm a Penix fan. I'm sold on Penix, especially when you give Penix good targets. Remember in 2020, he had the very big year because he had Fillier and Freifogel at Indiana and had the big season that year. I actually think in case if you were, after Ohio State, I think Washington would probably be in maybe the top 5 of wide receiver groups in the country.
USC, Texas, Florida State. Yeah, they're up there.
Okay. Maybe top 5 or 6. Maybe that's in that neighborhood. So I'm picking Washington. And by the way, I have Washington as a playoff team.
Wow.
I'm waffling on that a little bit because I may revise that here in a minute. Okay. Because I want to get to the SEC. Last one, even though I don't think much of the Big 12, the bottom line, I like my man, former mullet man, Quinn Ewers. I think Texas wins the Big 12 this year. I'm not Brent Venables yet in his second year at Oklahoma. I think they'll be a little bit better, but I just think Ewers has a really good year. They don't go to Tuscaloosa and win. I can't quite get there, although I think that's going to be a great football game. I would not be surprised if they did. Remember, it takes special quarterback play to go into Tuscaloosa and win. But I think that's a game that's a one-possession game. I'd be interested to see the line on that one. I don't know if it's already out, but
oh, I'm sure it is.
Yeah, but we have some time before we get to that. But
yeah, considering how well Texas played against them, they have broken the Bama mystique. They've been on the field with these guys. They know they can play with them. And Quinn Ewers was having a heck of a first quarter.
Right.
In that game last year, and now he's going to face a similar defense. And Alabama, I've got him at 10-2, both losses in the SEC. Like you, I'm obviously picking them to beat Texas, but it would not surprise me. But at home, they hardly ever lose. They haven't lost since Joe Burrow beat them in 2019, and before that, it was 2015.
Right. Well, it goes back to the special quarterback play to win. Johnny Manziel won a Heisman there. Cam Newton won a Heisman there. They all played great going into Tuscaloosa and winning. So I'm not saying Quinn Ewers can do that. I'm not saying he can duplicate that, but I think he's going to have a really good year, and I think he's going to give them some problems. Now, Alabama's obviously got the more overall talented roster. That's without question. But although I think if you rank Texas's roster, it's probably somewhere top 5, top 10 in the country, at least top 10 in the country.
Oh yeah. And
then if you couple that with better quarterback play than Alabama's getting, that's a force multiplier. That's a difference maker right there.
The Alabama quarterback situation is similar in this way to Ohio State, where if I'm going to trust the system, the legacy, the coaching, and everything that they've done with whomever they've been given, which it's usually a 5-star guy. So it's not like they take rubbish off the side of the road and make it, Peyton Manning. Then I'm going to believe that everything's just going to be fine, that they've got 3 options and they're going to select the best one, of course, and then they're going to coach him up and he's going to be a great SEC player. But the difference is that, like Stroud and Fields, of course, we really haven't seen either McCord or Brown really against capable opponents.
That's true.
We have seen these guys, at least 2 out of the 3 we have seen, and they weren't that good.
No. Buckner wasn't good. Milroe was not good from what I saw last year. No, it was not. See, here's the thing, though, with Alabama, though. I mean, the last couple years, Bryce Young carried them, in my view. In 2021, they got to the title game largely due to Bryce Young, Jameson Williams, a little bit of Mechie mixed in there. That was not, Ohio State probably saw, it was not those peak, Alabama offenses from, let's say, 2018, 2019, 2020, where they put it all together on the offensive line, running back, wide receiver, and quarterback. I mean, when they had those really good offenses with Tua, and then they had the Mac Jones offense of 2020. So the one thing, and I talked to some Georgia fans after the Ohio State Georgia game last year about where Alabama was at, and the one thing that I've noticed about Alabama the last couple of years, and it certainly I think peaked when they played us, is in 2020, I thought they clearly had the best offensive line in the country, and maybe one of the best offensive lines of the Nick Saban era. I've not seen that the last couple of years out of Alabama. I mean, and I've not seen that dominant run game that they've had in the past. When they just had those road graders up front and, could just pound you.
True and true. Ever since Nick Saban took over, Alabama has had two definite guys in the backfield, usually four deep, guys on the bench that will eventually step in and be the guys. But just, we could run through all the names, but two guys that would eventually be pretty significant NFL players, and just, yes, a All-America star-studded offensive line. If you go back to their 2021 season, especially the LSU, the Texas A&M, and the Auburn games, and look at their rushing totals, it's just inconceivable.
Right.
They were averaging like 1.5 yards a carry.
Yeah, I mean, they were lucky. I mean, they had a special back last year. I mean, I thought he was one of the most electrifying players. Jahmyr Gibbs was just incredible last year. I mean, it was really Young and Jahmyr Gibbs that carried them in a lot of their games last year. So, I mean, I look at Alabama. I'm going with the same prediction you have, Mark. You said 10-2, correct?
Yes. I scribbled out 9-3 and 5-3.
I can't go there. I think they win at least 10 games. I will say that division is interesting to me. I will say, when you look at it, is this it for Jimbo Fisher? This has got to be it for him, right? At Texas A&M.
I am pushing the chips toward the middle of the table for Jimbo. Did you see Jimbo? I put him at 10-2.
I did not see your early predictions. I just got here.
10-2 for Jimbo.
Wow. You're saying 10-2.
10-2.
See, I'm wondering if he gets off to a rocky start, if all that oil money there down that's supporting him, and all those folks that backed up the Brinks truck to get him down there at Texas A&M might get him out of there early.
I think that their defense is going to be the second best defense in the conference this year.
Well, they should be good this year, because if you think about it, I mean, Nick Saban said it. They bought that 2021 recruiting class, right? Or, I mean, they went out or was it the 2022 or 2021 recruiting class?
I think it was 22.
Yeah, the 22 recruiting class that basically Saban said the quiet part out loud. They just went out and paid for it. And, well, I guess him and Jimbo, kissed and made up. But, went out, paid for that recruiting class. Now, some of those guys, if I'm not mistaken, did hit the portal, out of that class. But they should still have a high percentage of that class ready to play this year. One would think, right?
Yes. If you look at the talent on defense, the lineup, both guys that have proven it and other guys that are just Georgia level recruits, they're loaded on defense. And I do think that I've seen enough of Connor Weigman to think that he can be a really good top level quarterback. And Shamar Stewart's was arguably the best wide receiver in his class, and he started to show it last year. And Muhsin Muhammad at wide receiver. I'm sold on Texas A&M. I'm not sold, but I'm taking a leap of faith.
Well, I mean, so what's it take to save Jimbo's job? At least 9-3, or are you saying it's got to take 10-2? Bottom line.
Oh, I think if he goes 9-3, he's going to keep his job.
Okay.
Yeah.
I tend to agree. Now, you have the same prediction that I have on winning that side of the division, which I believe is LSU, correct?
Well, it has yet to be determined.
Okay.
That's another division where I have made it tough on myself, and I'm going to have to now sit down and figure out who beat who to determine who won the division. I've got a three-way tie.
I'm in on LSU this year. I'm just going to say it. I think they beat the Noles in the opener in a really close game. I think it's going to be one of the games of the year is Florida State LSU. But I think Daniels has a really good year at quarterback. I think they have the best defensive player in college football. And I just think that maybe a little bit of the momentum, that they got from last year, winning that side of the division, I think they carry over this year. Maybe I'm just buying Brian Kelly and his fake Southern accent and all that garbage. I mean, give it up, Brian. You're an Irish Catholic from the East Coast. Don't try to fit in. I mean,
I think
come
he
on.
did. I think he just gave it that opening speech, and then it went away. It just.
I mean, that was sad. I mean, talk about sad. I mean, so I would just say I am in on LSU this year. By the way, I'm not the only one. Remember, our buddy Colin Cowherd picked them to win the national championship.
That's what I hear from guys like you. I have not heard it myself, but okay.
Yeah,
over anybody in particular.
Well, I'm going to get there. We haven't gotten to Dave Green.
I'm talking about Cowherd.
Oh yes, he has them. He has his two favorite coaches playing against each other. He has Kelly against Harbaugh in the national title game, and Kelly winning.
Okay.
Yeah, his two favorite.
Michigan. They've never played.
Okay. Yeah, his two favorite college football coaches. So he's big fans of both, by the way. So yeah, I am in on LSU this year. I think that they win that side of the division. I think that they get to the Georgia Dome, and I'm going there. I'll show you how far I'm going here in a minute. I do think that Auburn's still in rebuild. You've got Auburn going 8-4. I find that to be interesting.
Yeah, I didn't expect to take that leap either, but
okay.
Yeah, I have to buy into my knowing that there are going to be a certain amount of teams that are going to take at least a 3-game leap. And I think that Auburn with Peyton Thorne at quarterback, if he wins the job, I'm surprised that he hasn't already, but Peyton Thorne at quarterback. And if you look over their roster, they played everyone close last year, except for Alabama. The Alabama game wasn't that close, but everybody else.
Mark, Penn State got out of control too. I watched that game. That was not.
Well, I'm looking at the conference.
Okay.
They took LSU to the wire. They should have beat LSU.
Yeah, it was a close game. You're right. Gosh, boy, that Brian Harsin hire will always just was a head scratcher of head scratchers. I still feel Gus Malzahn should be the head coach down there, but that ship's already sailed. But by the way, I had this thought. I put this in the Pac-12 conversation last night. Is the SEC level of quarterback play down this year?
Yes.
I mean, compared, let's say, to the last 2, 3, 4 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Alabama's got its worst quarterback in 15 years, most likely, unless something surprising happens. Georgia lost a legend. I know people don't want to hear this about Stetson Bennett, but the guy's a legendary quarterback. So I don't know that they're going to replace that. Hendon Hooker is going to be difficult to replace by Joe Milton. Right. Will Levis, for all his detractors, was the first pick in the second round of the NFL draft. I don't know if they upgraded a quarterback or not. Probably a lateral Kentucky move. Spencer Rattler's still there. Graham Mertz at Florida, obviously not the athlete that Anthony Richardson is. He's not going to be a first-round pick. Will Rogers is still at Will Rogers and KJ Jefferson, though, are exceptional quarterbacks. And Ole Miss's quarterback room is loaded.
By the way, Thorne, the transfer from Sparty, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting to see how that's going to work out at Auburn. They got a couple of Big Ten quarterbacks. Milton's going to be at Tennessee. That's going to be interesting.
And Graham Mertz.
Yeah, that's right. The much heralded Graham Mertz coming out of high school. He was supposed to be a big time prospect. Yeah. I posted it in the Pac-12 conversation. Who's the best quarterback in the conference? I got back Jackson Dart as the best quarterback in the SEC. I don't know if you're buying that. Yeah, I don't know if you're buying that.
No, I'm not buying it.
I'm not either.
He could be, but no. I'm not gonna deter from my detour from my rankings from a few months ago. I went with KJ Jefferson 1, Jaden Daniels 2.
Right. I might flip that. Obviously big on LSU, so I'm big on Daniels this year. I'm with you though. To the other side of the division, I think it could be tough for Georgia to replace Stetson Bennett. I mean, aside from Uncle Lou tearing him down 6 ways from Sunday after that SEC title game loss to Alabama, basically called for his head. And he will say that. He will stipulate that. By the way, I don't know if you've ever asked him that. Ask Uncle Lou if he wanted, Stetson Bennett's head after that title game loss to Alabama. He did. He was not singing his praises by any stretch of the imagination. But it goes to show you when you play well in the playoffs and win 2 national championships, and I give him his flowers, I give him his credit, he played well in the big games.
He played it well in almost every game. I understand that people had this, there's people fall in love with certain athletes and there are polarizing athletes. The last time we had an SEC quarterback this polarizing, well, we had Johnny Manziel, we had Tim Tebow, that you either love him or hate him. And it seemed like just about everybody outside the Georgia it seemed like everybody inside the Georgia fan base for a long time hated him. And everybody outside the Georgia fan base laughed at him. And now everybody outside the Georgia fan base just still does not give him his due at all. He's an all-time great quarterback.
See, here's the thing. I think that Georgia, and the bottom line is Georgia is basically, and even Lou had said this a few years ago, that in many ways Kirby's trying to win the same way Nick Saban won with his early teams. Right?
Well, he was. I think that gets overplayed considerably.
Oh, really?
See, Georgia threw the ball. They had like the top 5 passing offense in college football last year.
I mean, I'm not saying that Bennett didn't have a really good year. He did. But I guess what I'm saying is that, well, because you kind of separate out the Saban national title teams, like the teams that he won with when he had the wide receivers and the big time offenses, like we talked about, starting at the end of 2017 when he finally started Tua over Hurts, are a lot different than, let's say, the AJ McCarron, Greg McElroy teams, right?
Sure.
So that's what I would say is that now it seems like. And game manager is a divisive term to describe basically a mediocre quarterback. And I do think Bennett is more than that. But yeah, I mean, I'm saying this in maybe a complimentary way to Georgia is that basically maybe they are interchangeable at quarterback because the defense is so good, because they usually build up good offensive line play and find multiple good running backs to run the ball, that maybe they can just go to the next guy.
Then why? I get that, but again, I think a lot of Stetson Bennett's detractors, I think it all goes back to people's predetermined mindset that he wasn't the answer because he's a 3-star and he's a walk-on. And people can't get past that. Why? I don't know. Now, I couldn't get past that early because that's what I had to go on was his recruiting credentials. And then I saw him play and I was like, well, no, he's a good quarterback, but he's not great. And his first year or so would make big mistakes in big games. The first big game he really played was in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, and they had a lead with about 10 minutes left, and then he kind of fell apart.
Right.
And they lost, and he fell apart against Bama in the SEC championship game that you allude to, and fell apart in a game that they lost against Georgia or against Florida in 2020 and made big mistakes. So for me, I always thought from the time I watched him play, I thought he was a really good quarterback who just made 2 or 3 bad mistakes against good opponents. And he corrected that.
Well, what I'm saying, though, is that maybe that the talent level that Kirby has built up around there is that it could make that position interchangeable. That's the long and short of what I'm saying. Is that, because their defense is going to be so strong and because they usually, can find a really strong running game and put that around their quarterback, that, it might just be next guy up at quarterback.
You wonder what Tua, Mac Jones, and Bryce Young would have been both in college and what their draft status would have been playing somewhere else.
Well, I mean, they were playing around a lot of talent. There's no doubt. I mean, Tua definitely played it, with the best receivers of the Saban era. I mean, 2019, he was playing with 4 first-round draft picks at wide receiver when you stop to think about it. I mean, how's your life when you got that kind of talent around you? So, yeah, I mean, I will say that I'm picking Georgia. I'm wondering if there's a drop-off at Tennessee. I mean, again, that's a lot of talent to lose. And how much of a drop-off is there between Milton and Hendon Hooker? I'm really curious about that.
How much talent did they lose? I don't know that Tennessee lost that much talent.
Well, I mean, I'm just the top 3. You lose Hooker, you lose Tillman, and then you lose Hyatt.
Yeah, I think their wide receivers coming back are just as good. I think they're fine at wide receiver. They've got their 3 best running backs back. I think it's all on Milton's shoulders. If he is 80 or 90% of the player that Hendon Hooker was, I think they're fine.
Okay.
And he's got more top end talent than Hendon Hooker has. Now, that doesn't guarantee anything for sure. He's got to make the right decisions.
Yeah, I mean, boy, I'm still upset at Hyatt robbing Marvin Harrison Jr. out of the Biletnikoff. I know
What's it have to do with him?
Yeah, I know. I just when I mentioned Jalen Hyatt, I just that comes to mind. I'm just sorry. But in any case, I think Milton, obviously was stuck in that COVID situation, bad situation. School up north people will attest to that. And maybe this works out better for him. It'll be interesting to see. I'm a fan. I think Heupel's a good coach, by the way. I actually think he's going to do a good job down there. I'm just wondering if there's a bit of a drop off this year. I mean, you got them at 9-3. I could see that. I'm kind of between 8-4 and 9-3 for them if I had to pick a record.
Yeah. So if you look at Georgia as almost an automatic loss, and they've got to go to Alabama. So let's say there's 2 losses there. And then you've got a smattering of Kentucky, South Carolina, Florida. I don't know who else they play in the East. I'd have to look that up. But so there's 4 other potential losses. So if they split those games, then you've got your 8-4 record.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. If Milton's playing well, that game at Rocky Top between them and Georgia could be interesting. I know that that freight train that was the Tennessee offense came screeching to a halt when they had to go to Athens last year, and Georgia totally shut them down, holding them to 13 points. But
yes,
yeah, that's actually when I had a feeling that Georgia was the best team in the country when they did that to that Tennessee offense.
Yeah, Tennessee does have a tough draw out of the Western Division with Texas A&M and Bama.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have to play those 2.
Yeah, that's why I'm leaning. That's why I was thinking about that 8-4 mark. That's why I'm debating on who's going to finish second. Maybe. See, here's the thing with Georgia, though. I'm just wondering if Georgia gets to the Dome undefeated, or if they get to the Dome with 1 loss.
Sure, these teams have to lose games at some point, regardless of how good they are.
See, but this is why I was waffling on my Washington pick real quick. Is that if they get to the Dome undefeated, Mark, and they lose a close one, because I'm just going to put it out there. I've got LSU beating Georgia in the Dome. Okay. I have LSU as one of my playoff teams. But if LSU gets there with 1 loss and beats an undefeated Georgia, is Georgia already in? Because if you look at Georgia's schedule, it's not the toughest schedule in the world. That non-conference isn't great. I mean, they don't catch anybody. Who do they catch in crossover?
They've got Auburn, and I'll have to look it up. They've got Auburn and I'll find it here at some point. Ole Miss.
Okay. So, I mean, they're a team that could go to the Georgia Dome with what, one maybe top 15, top 20 win, possibly over Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I'm with you. I think Florida's looking at 6-6 this year. When I look at the rest of that division, I'm just wondering if they get there undefeated, and let's say they lose a close one to LSU, would that mean that they would still get in? That would be an interesting debate.
Well, previous years should not matter, but I think they do. I think the committee subconsciously takes them into consideration that they're the two-time defending champions and they lost a close SEC championship game.
Okay.
Then they're in.
Yeah, but Mark Rogers' top 25 that makes sense would not rank them very high if they only have one top 20 win over 12 games.
They would not be ranked extremely high.
Because rightfully so, you put the emphasis on quality victories.
I do. And
Yep.
quality losses.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yep. That's my prediction, folks. I've got Georgia and LSU in the title game.
Okay.
I'm going to say Georgia does stub their toe, so they'll go 11-1, and they lose the title game to LSU. LSU goes 12-1 as the playoff team. So as of right now, by the way, I said I had Florida State winning the ACC with 2 losses. I have Texas winning the Big 12 with 2 or 3 losses. So the Big 12 is going to be a non-factor this year. So I have Washington as a playoff team, and then I have LSU as a playoff team.
And so you've set us up for 2 other playoff spots and 1 other conference to be unveiled.
That should be interesting come tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, shouldn't it?
Unless, what scenario crossed my mind today? I should wait one night to say this because maybe I'll predict this. What if Ohio State goes to Notre Dame and loses? And then loses a Big Ten game, whether that's to Penn State or on the road to Wisconsin, especially if they lose that Wisconsin game.
Right.
And then they win the rest of the games. And they would be the Eastern Division champion with 2 losses overall.
We've been close in the past to having a 2-loss conference champion make it. I mean, Auburn in 2017 would have gotten in had they beaten Georgia in that title game. And you made the case for Ohio State in 2017 to be in the playoff.
Yes.
I would not have. I thought they had a stronger case in 18 than 17, to be fair, over Oklahoma. I just think that Iowa loss stuck out too much. Too much.
Why did the Iowa loss stick out more than the Purdue loss?
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at wins and losses versus wins and losses. They lost 2 games in 17. They only lost 1 game in 18.
Yeah. But you were talking about comparing those 2 games. You were
No.
saying that the Iowa game stuck out when Purdue was a worse loss in my eyes.
Okay. I mean, I guess I was saying it stuck out that they had a second loss and they had a really bad second loss. Let me rephrase.
Gotcha.
So, but I'm saving up all my good stuff for tomorrow. I wanted to speak to our Southern brethren tonight and get some SEC predictions in here, but I think it's going to be an interesting year in the SEC. I'm going to be interested to see the level of quarterback play in the conference overall, and especially interested to see Alabama. I think people may be too quickly picking the demise of Nick Saban. I'm not necessarily buying into that, although them going 10-2 is an off year in Tuscaloosa. But so.
All right, David.
Well, always a pleasure to talk college football with the great Mark Rogers. When you going live tomorrow, my friend?
I believe that will be a little bit late night tomorrow night, roughly 10 o'clock.
Okay. Have pen and pad ready. I will have my research, and I will be set to go.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, David. We'll see you. And let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. You see our SEC predictions and much to be determined when we all wrap it up at the conclusion of the week. We got the real MVP on the line here at the Voice of College Football.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this fine evening?
Doing well, DeReal. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I love the Texas A&M at 10-2 prediction. That's exactly where I've got them as well. I've got LSU winning the West at 11-1 and Georgia going 12-0. So that's my title. For Kentucky, you've got them at 9-3, which is honestly higher than I've got them. I think they're an 8-4 team this year. I think they lose to Georgia, Tennessee, Mississippi State, and Alabama this year.
Okay.
Now South Carolina, you've got it 8-4. I think this is going to be a step back year for South Carolina personally. I think they go 6-6. I'm not sold on Spencer Rattler at the final 2 weeks of the season being the Spencer Rattler we see throughout the year.
Well, I think we've seen him long enough that I can buy that. We saw somebody in Spencer Rattler that hit the scene as a hotshot freshman and was in a bit over his head right at the start of the season, but straightened himself out, had a really good freshman year, and then lost his job at Oklahoma, and then really did not have a good year last year until very late in the season. And so I get it. And South Carolina's got to run into those three teams above them there, plus Texas A&M, plus North Carolina, and plus Clemson.
Right. They have one of the most difficult schedules every single year in the country.
Yeah, I probably should have reevaluated that. But anyway, it's posted. It's there. That's what it is.
And Vanderbilt at 4-8 is interesting to me. First off, you got them beating Wake Forest at Wake Forest, which I'm not sold that they're able to do that, but you also have them going 0-8 against the SEC. I'd be surprised if that happens. I could see them clipping an Auburn, a Missouri, somebody like that, and beating them. I mean, they beat Florida and Kentucky last year, which is really impressive for Vanderbilt. And for them to go from that to 0-8, I just don't see that happening. I think they win one SEC game at least this year.
Okay, so you see Vandy winning one game, and you think it's just inconceivable that they could go 0-8.
I think there's enough 50-50 games where it's going to be hard for them to go 0-8. I think they win one because I think they're in the process of learning how to win football games. I mean, Vanderbilt has had a losing culture historically. So it's going to take them time in order to build a winning culture. I think they're going to have a lot of leads for Vanderbilt's sake, they're going to have a lot of leads in the fourth quarter and blow games. But I think they're going to beat one SEC team. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but a team can be in the process as a program of improving and still not see that in the results. They could have three close games and lose all three of them and then get blown out like they typically do in the other five, and they're going to be 0-8 in the conference. If they end up winning one or two games, no, I don't know a soul that thought Vanderbilt was going to beat Florida or beat Kentucky, but they did. So nobody's expecting them to do much of anything. So if they pick off a couple games, yeah, I'm not going to be surprised. But that's where I've got them, 0-8. I think they blow every game. I just think everybody's better than them, and of course, it takes upsets for the worst team in the league to win anything. But I just don't think things will break for them.
I mean, I could see that. I could somewhat see it, but I just have a hard time. I think they'll win one, but that's okay. Now, Florida at 6-6 and 3-5 from the conference is interesting to me because you're telling me that they either beat Utah or Florida State with that prediction, right?
Yes.
So which team do they beat?
I don't know. They're going to beat one of them. I don't know. This is why I do these predictions this way. Now, in the past, I've sat here and I've gone through every game and made a record prediction and told you who was going to beat whom, but I did not do that this year. I just didn't really take the time. Much like the other thing I would like to take time on is there are going to be, oh, shoot, how many games are going to be lost by these conferences to group of five teams? Probably, I looked at this to see how many games the SEC was going to lose out of conference, and I think I came up with 5 or 6. But they're going to be losses to Group of 5 teams. Now, I didn't really pinpoint those, but those are going to be there too. So, I didn't really whittle this down to the degree that I would like to have time to do. So just like the Vandy, I actually screwed up in the Vandy situation because I did have Wake. I believe I had Wake. I'd have to go back and look at Wake because I think they've got another difficult non-conference or another Power 5 non-conference game that they could lose.
Wake Forest, let me see. They play Notre Dame at Notre Dame.
Okay, so I've got them losing that game, and then I get them losing to Vandy. So Vandy would lose to Wake and be 3-9. There you go.
So I see you've got 3 teams in the SEC tied at 5-3. Do you how do you think the tiebreakers are going to go? I know you haven't done a deep dive into it, but are you going to assume? I think Tennessee's going to take I don't think they're going to take a huge step back, but with their schedule, I think they're going to take an 8-4 team this year.
Well, I've got to take a deep dive, not on this one because it doesn't matter, but I'm going to have to take a deep dive on 3 of them so far because I've got to determine who's going to play in conference championship games.
I got you.
I've got an SEC West, I've got a Big 12, and I've got a an ACC where I've got to figure out who's going to be there, who's going to win what games.
Right. And I know David Greenshield had LSU and Georgia for the national or the SEC championship game. I've also got that happening. I think they both go in. I think LSU and Georgia both make the playoffs. And I think LSU wins the national championship this year, Mark. I think LSU, and I know the Notre Dame fans are going to hate it, but I think Brian Kelly is a better coach than what Notre Dame can provide.
That's great. Those Notre Dame fans, they hate Brian Kelly. But I think he saw an opportunity where he could recruit at the very top of the sport, and he wanted the challenge of the SEC, and you've got to respect him for that.
Yeah, and I mean, last year he beat Alabama. I mean, that's really impressive. And I think
go ahead.
I think the Florida State game's not even going to be close.
Who do you think LSU is going to lose to?
I'm going to pull up their schedule, but I think the team that's better than them is Texas A&M. But I don't know where they fall on the schedule.
They've got that game at home, I know, and it's the last game of the season. So I really just think LSU's not quite there from an overall roster depth. I even think Brian Kelly's spoken to that he doesn't have the roster where he would like it. He's just not been able to pile up enough recruiting classes to get them to that point.
Right. I understand that, but what he was able to do last year was remarkable. I'm all in on Brian Kelly. I'm buying the Brian Kelly stock if it's available out there. And I'm looking at the schedule. I do think they lose to Texas A&M at home. I think they have the the SEC West locked up, and I think they're just going to drop that game, and it's not going to really matter.
And you've got Alabama with what record?
7-5, Mark. 7-5.
7-5. Oh my goodness. We had people early on in the chat that had, and this wasn't just one guy, but we had several people with Alabama going undefeated.
Well, I understand that because they're Alabama, but I'm not sold on them at all. I think Justice Haynes is probably their best overall player. He looked amazing in the spring game.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on their quarterback. I'm not sold on their offensive coordinator, their defensive coordinator. So I think Texas A&M, Texas, LSU, Auburn, and Tennessee all beat them beat the Alabama Crimson Tide this year.
Okay. Yeah, 7-5. I just can't. I did say that I had Alabama at 9-3, and then I scribbled that out and I bumped them up to 10-2. I did that.
Now, would it shock me if they go 12-0? No, it wouldn't shock me at all. But I think the style of football they play, I think they're going to get exposed. I don't see their offensive line improving enough to where they're able to control the lines of scrimmage, run and pound the clock down, and just take all the time off, control time of possession. I just don't see that happening. I know people think it's crazy, but crazy things happen in college football. Texas A&M was the 6th-ranked team in the country in the preseason poll, and they went to 5-7. You know, Baylor was ranked in top 10 last year in preseason.
Baylor, Texas A&M, and who was the other one that was in the top 10 that
Oklahoma, I
didn't finish
believe.
ranked? Oklahoma. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not even living up to my my standard of how many teams history has shown us is going to have this 3-game swing one way or the other. I've only got, I believe, 2 teams in this conference that are going to have that kind of swing. Yes, I only have 2, Texas A&M and Auburn.
Yeah, it's hard to point out the specific teams that are going to do it. Kind of like who's going to be ranked versus unranked.
Yeah,
I mean, you know it's going to happen, but it's very hard to pick them out.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous. It looks ridiculous, and if you make that kind of call, people think it's unbelievable, but it's going to happen. It is going to happen. So, who would be your most likely team in the preseason top 10 not to be ranked?
Florida State.
Florida State, and then Alabama?
Alabama's 2. Washington's 3.
Yeah, see, Washington's number 1 for me. And then I guess I would say Florida State after that. Who else? You know what? LSU. I'm not completely sold on LSU, even though I've got them at 10-2 and competing for a playoff spot there. I could see them going 7-5 with their schedule.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC West, everybody's got to play everybody. And it's really hard division.
Yeah.
So
I could see USC going 8-4 with their final 5 or 6 games.
have you? Speaking of USC, Mark, have we figured out why people think they're going 15-0 yet? Have somebody called in and explained that to us yet? I'm still waiting for that.
It's not been explained yet. I'm ready for it though. Yeah. You know what? The 12-0 is not something I'm predicting, and I think is a bit much. But hey, I would even give that individual 12-0 and say, you know what? Let's start at 12-0. I'll give you the first 12, and you're talking about defeating Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, UCLA, somebody else tough in there, Utah in the back half of the season. So I'll give you that. But then they're going to have to defeat one of those teams again, and then 2 playoff games.
Not happening, Mark. I just don't see it happening at all. But
Yeah.
the problem with the Pac-12 and the way they devised it is everybody plays everybody, and everybody's got such a hard schedule. I mean, I could see any of them finishing the year unranked because I think all of them are just equal.
Yeah, because this is all it takes is for one team to have injuries at the wrong time or have the wrong injuries, season-ending injuries to key players, to just have a rash of bad bounces, unlucky plays, last-minute field goal misses, whatever, and 10-2 can become 7-5 rather quickly.
Yeah, and speaking of USC, didn't they lead the turnover margin by a wide margin last year?
Yes.
What are the odds of that being duplicated again?
Yeah, that usually swings in the other direction. It's like one-run baseball games.
Right. I mean, last year they played Oregon State. Oregon State was a great team last year, and they probably should have beaten USC, but their quarterback threw 4 picks in that game.
Yeah. Yeah, who was the best team that USC beat last year? I guess it was Notre Dame. They didn't play Oregon. They didn't play Washington. So first of all, they got a scheduling break because they didn't play either one of those teams. They lost to Utah, then lost to them, of course, in the championship game. They beat UCLA by 1 score. Guess they beat Notre Dame. That was their best win last year. So USC and Oregon State or Notre Dame. So they didn't prove that much.
And I'm looking at some of the scores against the lesser, quote unquote, lesser competition. I mean, they only beat Cal by 6 points.
Yeah.
Cal. I mean, Cal was horrible last year. They lost to Colorado.
Yeah. The Arizona
I mean,
game.
that should be a 20 to 30 point victory.
Yes. Now, our friend Tim would tell you that they were beating Cal by whatever the score was. I don't think it was by that much, but then they called off they
called off the Dogs so much that they only had a 6-point win.
I was looking for what animal that the saying goes. Yes, called off the Dogs, and then they brought everyone to the sideline and played the third stringers and all that business. But still,
they've got some really bad third stringers if that's the case, Mark.
Yeah. Yes. All the other elite teams in college football do the same thing, and they still win 48-7.
Some of them do it against teams in the national title game, and still the score keeps going up.
Yes, they do.
And I'm looking at some of the other results. Stanford, 28-41. Stanford?
Yeah.
My gosh, that's horrible, Mark. Washington
Arizona
State
gave them a game.
Yeah, Arizona, 37-45. These are way too many close results for bad teams, quote unquote bad teams. Washington State, 30-14. I mean, if USC wants to win a national championship, you need to beat these level of competition by 20, 30 points per game. You can't play around with your food because it'll bite you.
I guess. I don't know if you were here at the outset, but I got on here, and since this is the SEC prediction show, I laid it on pretty thick for about 5 minutes about how dominant this conference has been and how so much I want to be able to debate the best conference, but the results are just too overwhelming. And our buddy, I believe it was Mike Rotunda in the chat, got me going a little bit because he left a ridiculous comment. We like Mike. He's here all the time. We appreciate his support, but some ridiculous comment about how it's all Georgia, Alabama, and nobody else is any good in the SEC. And I rolled off the number of wins in the SEC against the level of competition. And again, it's just, I wish we could debate this, but you look at who this conference beat last year. You know, nobody else has beaten Ohio State and Utah and Oregon and Texas and on down the line. So Kansas State.
I mean, they beat the champion of every other conference in the Power Five.
Yes. Yeah, they did.
And I find it so, I just think it's you hate us because you ain't us mentality. I think it's honestly just jealousy. I mean, Mark, is it true the Big Ten is adding 4 schools from the West Coast next year?
Yes, they are.
Oh, so they're a national conference?
They are, from sea to shining sea.
Okay. Some conferences, Mark, don't need to be national in order to be the best in college football. Some conferences can maintain regionality and still be better than other conferences.
Yeah, that regionality's been stretched a little bit, but...
No, Oklahoma and Texas are part of the South.
Missouri, Oklahoma, yeah.
Missouri's the only questionable one. Oklahoma, Texas, to me, are southern states. them two, then all the way up to halfway to Virginia as the Southern State.
Oh, I have no issue with that side of it. I have a little bit of an issue with Missouri and Oklahoma, but they're still well within their geography, more so than any other conference.
Right.
Yes.
I like D-Rock Irish's response. You don't even have to be in a conference. Shout out to the Notre Dame man for not even being in a conference. If they please, can you please do something, Notre Dame fans? Just get this expansion conference realignment over with. Everybody's waiting on you to make a decision. Please make a decision so we can get this conference realignment over with.
Now, if
Anything
the
you want to
SEC
add to that?
Well, yes, I've been on that for a long, long time about Notre Dame, and I don't blame Notre Dame. I blame college football and the lack of organization and leadership that allows Notre Dame to be again, I'll liken it to the toddler that I see in the grocery store being, flipping out on its parent. I don't blame the 5-year-old. I blame the parent. So Notre Dame's going to go with what they want, and they want to be unique, and they want to hang on to that unique quality that they so cherish.
Yeah, and he just put in another comment. It is an NCAA problem, and he's right. D-Rock Irish is 100% correct. It is an NCAA problem. They should be in a conference, though. Come on, Notre Dame. That way, the SEC, what we need in order just to get better is add Clemson and Miami. I know there's a whole rumor about Florida State trying to get out of the ACC and stuff, but I think Florida State's thinking they're much better than they actually are. Like, what would they be in the SEC, Florida State? The 13th best team in the conference?
Florida State?
Yeah. Recently, not all time.
Oh, recently? Well, recently.
Yeah, I don't care what happened in 1970.
Yeah, like in the last 5 years. Yeah, they would have gotten drubbed.
So I just think they need to, cool it down a bit, the Florida State man. But if they do add Clemson, Mark, where do you think they would fit in? Would they be a top 5 SEC team with how stacked the SEC is? I mean,
the Clemson of the last 2 years would be 8-4. The Clemson of 2015 to 2020, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence. Wow, you got to think they obviously proved in the playoffs and in championship games how really good they are. But when you got to go through that grind every week, but if Alabama did it, I guess Clemson would have done it most of those seasons too, because they showed in that one-on-one matchup that they were pretty much neck and neck with them at that point. But the Clemson that we see now, the last 2 seasons, no. Those 20-13 wins against Boston College where they're hanging on defending the red zone, those aren't going to go well when you're playing a capable team, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, South Carolina. So
you don't think Clemson would be currently, right now, a top 5 SEC team?
Georgia, Alabama better, LSU better. Tennessee certainly played them in the Orange Bowl. I think that they would be right in that range, 4 to 5.
I think they'd be like 7 or 8. I would add Oklahoma and Texas above them as well.
You think Oklahoma is better than Clemson?
Over the last few years, I think they're going to get back. I think the last year was just a one-season blip on the radar. I think they're probably going to go 10-2 or 11-1 this year. I think they finished second in the or third in the Big 12, but they're going to finish tied for second, but lose the tiebreaker to Texas Tech.
Okay.
So I think they're going back to being a really good football team.
Yeah. So on one hand, just knowing how tough the SEC has been for 15 years and thinking about Clemson having to go through, even as a superior team at the time, when you have to play top 25 teams over and over and over and over instead of playing Duke and Georgia Tech and Boston College week after week, that you're going to trip up. But I'm just trying to weigh that against those same teams, those great Clemson teams, when they played Alabama, most notably on the big national stage. Well, what happened? They showed that they were that good. So if they had to meet that challenge week in, week out in the SEC, they most likely would have done it.
You're right. And I see a comment I would like you to respond to from Michael Campbell. Said, show me an SEC conference schedule that Notre Dame can't win double digits. Mark, I mean, where do you want to take that comment?
All right, Michael, where are you? Show me. There we go. There we go. Okay. Let's clear the screen here and we could rant. Let's go with that South Carolina schedule. You want to go with that one?
Sure, that works for me. I mean, you can do basically any of them, but
yeah, so let's get this South Carolina schedule for 2023 up there. And of course, these two teams played in a Gator Bowl last season. And so this is what we're looking at. All right. So let's keep in mind that Notre Dame played Ohio State pretty tough. They beat South Carolina. They beat a decent North Carolina team, but they also lost to Marshall and Stanford. Okay. And now we're projecting forward with a better quarterback for Notre Dame. Okay. This North Carolina game to start the season, Notre Dame won that game against North Carolina last year by a couple scores. And I believe that they would win this game. Neutral site, Charlotte, kind of a neutral site. They would win this game, I don't know, 65% of the time, something in that range over North Carolina. Furman, they win. Oh, they go to Georgia. Okay. So they're 2-1 at this point, let's say. And they go and they play Mississippi State, which would be a home game for Notre Dame. You got to think that they would most likely win that game, but certainly I would not be, if Marshall can go into South Bend and Stanford can go into South Bend, then I can see Will Rogers giving Notre Dame all sorts of fits. Then they got to go to Neyland Stadium. Okay, they're losing that game. So here we are at 3-2. All right, then they come off a bye, and they've got Florida at home in South Bend. Let's say they win that game. They go to Mizzou. They're 5-2 after they beat Mizzou. Again, none of these games that I'm giving them as wins would be easy by any stretch. At Texas A&M. Okay, 5-2. They got to go to Texas A&M. This season, that's a close call, but I got to give Texas A&M the edge. The slight edge. So Notre Dame's at 5-3 at this point. They beat Jacksonville State. They're 6-3. Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and they will play Clemson this year, Notre Dame. So both South Carolina and Notre Dame play Clemson. And if they take over South Carolina's schedule, they've got Clemson at home. So I'm going to give them 3 wins to close out the season and say that Notre Dame goes 9-3 against this schedule. What do you think?
about right. I'd go 8-4, but
Yeah.
I think they trip up against somebody they shouldn't, like a Kentucky or Florida. But
Yeah, I gave them wins against Clemson, Kentucky, Florida, and Mississippi State. They could certainly lose one of those games.
yeah, I don't think they win every single toss-up game. I just don't think that's how the sport works.
No, I don't consider those toss-up games, though, but I get your point. I consider those more like 70-30 games.
I'd go slightly lower. I think they're 60-40 games. Especially the Clemson game. I would put that at 50-50.
Michael says, stop trying to over-exaggerate the Marshall BS for our entire history. Well, we're not talking about the history of Notre Dame football. I don't believe. I believe we're talking about this season. And when we're talking about this season, the results that most closely give us some kind of idea about this season would be, let's see, the last season. Yeah, last season. And if that Marshall game wasn't backed up with a clunker against Stanford, like if there was one of those, okay, there were two of those. Those are horrible. Okay, Marshall's not a horrible football team, but they're a group of 5 team. You know, you're talking about the 60th or 70th best team in the country. And Stanford was a horrible Power 5 team. Horrible.
Mark, can I read out some scores for you?
Sure.
Notre Dame 24-17 against Cal. Notre Dame 28-20 against BYU. Notre Dame 35-32 against Navy. Are any of those teams I mentioned good?
No. What, Navy went 3-9 in a group of 5 conference? Yeah, I think we gave, and I'm right there with everybody. The AP ranked Notre Dame like 18th at the end of the year. Yeah, that could be a little generous.
Yeah, a little generous. I mean, they won some I mean, if they're that good, I don't think they should be that close against Navy, Cal, and BYU.
In addition to losing to Marshall and Stanford.
Yes, in addition to, and those are 5 games. Those are 5 out of 12 games they play.
DeReal, I have people on Twitter that in the last couple of weeks have sent me direct tweeted, whatever they call it, halftime scores of the Ohio State Notre Dame game because Notre Dame was winning at halftime as some like proof that means something. So
it shows you the grace that Notre Dame has fallen to where they need to go to halftime scores to have an argument.
Yeah. So
I mean, Notre Dame is just the younger person's version of Nebraska. They were once a great school, but now the national titles are just out of sight, out of mind. Is there anything wrong with that statement I just made, Mark?
No, there's nothing wrong with it. Notre Dame's a really good football program. They're a top 15 program. Brian Kelly can be thanked for that because they were not that for over 10 years before that with Charlie Weiss and with Ty Willingham and with Bob Davie. They were racking up 7-6 seasons like nobody's business. And Brian Kelly elevated them to what was Michigan, Penn State level play, top 10 to 15. And they've been really good. They've been a really good football program for the last 10 years, mostly under Brian Kelly, of course. And when they play an elite team, they get generally manhandled. They always lose and they generally get manhandled. And that needs to change for Notre Dame to have some kind of argument on the national scene.
Is Brian Kelly the Notre Dame version of Nebraska's Bo Pelini?
Well, he's a higher grade Bo Pelini.
Obviously. Notre Dame, I think, is a higher grade version of Nebraska, though. I think we're going to look back at it in 5-10 years, and we're going to see that Notre Dame's going 8-4, 7-5 every year. And the Notre Dame fans are going to be happy. You know, I think they got a little ahead of themselves, assuming they can win 10 games every single year.
Well, I think that Notre Dame has a lot more hope going into the future than Nebraska does. I think that they're a national player for top recruits. And so they're still a destination. They're still, again, a place where when you look at top recruits, you see Notre Dame on that list in a lot of top 5 and high 4-star battles where Nebraska's not, they're not in that game.
Oh, I'm not going to say they're falling all the way down to Nebraska's level. I mean, Nebraska hasn't made a bowl game since 2016. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they could be the Richmond's Nebraska, where they go 7-5, 8-4 every single year. Marcus Freeman doesn't turn out to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And they look at it, Brian Kelly's probably won a national championship at LSU by that point in time. And, it turns out Notre Dame probably has some ceiling on them because of where they are in the country and their academic standards and stuff. Would you disagree with anything I said there?
Not necessarily disagree. I do think that, again, Notre Dame is an interesting, intriguing situation. They still have and always probably will have a national brand and will be able to stay in high level recruiting battles. And I don't know if they hired the right guy. All the people that I talked to believe that Marcus Freeman is the right guy. I think maybe he was a little bit, they jumped the gun a little bit ahead of when he would be ready for that job, but maybe he's weathered the storm. And I think Notre Dame is a place where you can be nationally relevant on the national landscape. But that very, very top elite level is something that they've had an issue with because they don't have the collection of talent, nor do they right now, until proven otherwise, to deal with Georgia, Alabama, and whomever else is in that tier at the time.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I mean, we got college football in a day or two away from now. It's conceivable they go to Dublin, Ireland, and take an L. It's seriously, it's conceivable. I mean, they only beat them by 3 last time.
Yeah, it's conceivable. I would be pretty stunned if Notre Dame lost.
Would it be a bigger upset than Northwestern beating Nebraska last year? Based off what we know with those two teams.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I don't see it that way. I don't see it that way at all. I think Navy could improve this year. I heard they're going to actually try to learn the forward pass. They're coming out with 1950s football instead of 1930s football, which is going to be good.
Yeah, I just think Nebraska or Notre Dame's well beyond Nebraska. Notre Dame is a top 10 to 15 team in the country. I would be shocked. Well, nothing shocks me at this point. But you know what I mean. I'd be surprised if they lost to Navy.
Okay.
Yeah, not expecting that whatsoever.
I'm just putting it on the radar. It could happen. Is it likely? No. I put it like 5%, though. I don't think it can be completely ruled out. It's not like they're playing Eastern Illinois or something like that, They're not playing the bottom dweller FCS level school here.
Yeah, they lost to Navy about 10 years ago. So your 5% might be right, where they lose that game once every 10 or 20 years.
Well, that's all I got for you, Mark. If you can put the link in the chat and fight on to USC.
Thanks to Real. Have a good night. All right, one more go around, folks. Please join the show if you'd like. Also, keep in mind that our Clemson live show is going on right now on the Clemson channel, so check that out. We've got an SEC channel that we just launched a couple weeks ago, and we would love for you to check it out. And please give us a sub if you so choose. You would do that for one of two reasons. Either you love the SEC, love the content, love everything we do there on the SEC channel, and I'm going to drop the link in the chat here in just a second. Or number two, you just understand that by building all the channels, you're building whatever channel that you're most invested in. So if you want this main channel to grow and thrive and want me to stay around doing this for a long, long time, then you still subscribe to the SEC channel because it's all tied together. All right. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We got Porter on the line.
Hey, good evening.
Hey, Porter. How are you?
Good. Well, I'll tell you what, if one of the parties in the Senate wanted to do a Senate filibuster, they probably should get drilled to do a filibuster. That guy can talk and talk and talk and talk. So My goodness. Actually, I took a nap and I woke up, got back on the show, and Drill was still talking. So anyway, he knows his stuff. I'm just kidding with him. He does know his stuff. But anyway, I thought your predictions were pretty good. I think you're right about Tennessee. I don't see Tennessee being a threat this year. I see. What'd you have? 9-3?
Yes.
Yeah, this is my prediction on Tennessee. I think Tennessee is going to be on their second quarter. I think they're going to get boat raced in Tuscaloosa. And by that time, they would have probably gotten their second loss by that time. And I think by that time, they're going to have the second string quarterback in, the one from California that's so heavily recruited. So I think they'll be on their second quarterback by the time Georgia plays them in Knoxville. And Kirby just knows how to shut down that offense. He did it even when Heupel was at Missouri as offensive coordinator. He knows how to shut that down. So I've got a lot of confidence in our defense going up against that offense. So I think we're the only fan base that doesn't fear Tennessee's offense. Even I think even Alabama's kind of wary of it.
Yeah, well, they took it on the chin last year. They were running around like they were in what's the Hank Stram line, like in a Chinese fire drill.
Well, it's not only that, they what they did to LSU last year was impressive.
Yeah.
Granted, it was before a lot of those Cajuns had even woken up. I think it was like a noon Eastern game, so half of them were asleep, the fan base. But because it's a different story. That stadium's a different story at night. But yeah, they shoot. I think I was at my son's soccer game and I kept getting the reports, and it was like 28. Before I knew, it was like 28-7 before I even, could even. I think by the second quarter.
I watched that game. I thought it was close at half.
No, they went out. I want to say they went out to like a 28-7 lead by the second quarter. It was pretty. They pretty much took it to them.
I did watch that game.
Well, like I said, I was just getting scores at my son's soccer game
here. It was 23-7 at half. Yeah, 23-7 at the half. There you go.
So, but the neat thing about, I saw the All-American team, and I don't think our wonderful safety. I know Ohio State people don't like him, but Bullard, I don't think he made first team All-American. And when you think about all the big games that he was involved in last year, he really, one of the ways we were able to clamp down on Tennessee in Athens was Kirby had Bullard coming every which way and doing a corner blitz. He actually played what's called what do we call it? It's not.
Did he play the star?
Star, yeah. It's like so he was our star guy. So he lined up on the slot guy, but then he would come with the blitz, and I bet he had 3 or 4 sacks in that game. So Hendon Hooker didn't know where they were coming from. So he was involved in that game. It was a huge influence in that game. We all know what he did against Ohio State. And then obviously in the national championship game, he had 2 picks and I think he had a fumble and 2 picks in that game. So that's one of the common threads that we had last year that's coming back on the team this year is Javon Bullard. I think I'm saying his name correctly, but he is a fantastic player. And what made me think about him is that Tennessee game because just what a force he was blitzing the passer from the secondary.
Yes, when I was running down all the teams, I mentioned him. Yes, he was the defensive MVP both against Ohio State and TCU, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now the running back room is getting a little thin. I don't know if you've heard in Athens.
Well, I heard about Branson Robinson.
Mm-hmm. And Dejan Edwards has a sprained MCL.
Oh, did not hear about that.
So they're not sure if he's going to be ready by the first game. So I don't think that's. I mean, that's not going to matter really. But we really need him healthy. We need by the time South Carolina rolls into town, and we need the kid from California. I mean, his name escapes me. Probably our best back when he's healthy. We need him healthy too. He has a hamstring. I think his number is number 2, but yeah, I mean, we got a walk on from Texas, a guy named Cash Jones that I think is going to get a lot of work, and then we got a true freshman, another running back from California, Roderick Robinson. That's probably going to get a lot of carries. So it's going to be it. Somebody made a good point the other day in that they knew this Georgia offense was going to be pass heavy because of who they brought in the transfer portal this year. And I think they knew Carson Beck he doesn't have the wheels that Stetson Bennett had. And so they know he's going to be more of a, if it's not there downfield, he's going to be dunking it off to the backs and to the slot receivers. And one of the things I liked about the spring game is we're showing a lot of creativity when it comes to the receivers. We're doing jet sweeps and passing, kind of reverses and stuff like that. So I think because our running back room is so thin, I think we're going to utilize the talent that we have with the receivers with Ra Thomas, and who came over from Mississippi State, and
Yep.
Dominic
Lovett.
From Missouri. So plus Kirby's done a good job the last 2 or 3 recruiting cycles of really going down into Florida and getting these young receivers, and we've really, I'd say the receiving core, and I'm not the only one saying this, it's kind of a common theme on a lot of the shows I've listened to. The receiving core right now is better than it's been since Kirby's been there, since he got there in 2016. So it's I think it's going to be a little bit more finesse than usual. But this back we got, this freshman back we got out of California is a bruiser. He's like 230 pounds. So he's not a guy that's going to take it 80 yards, but he's a guy that can just wear you out. And by the time the fourth quarter gets here, just kind of lean on you. And those 5-yard carries turn into 8-yard and then 12 yards. So, so it's going to be interesting as far as the running back, as far as the running back is concerned at Georgia.
Hummus Hero is telling us that Javon Bullard is classless.
He's classless. How's that?
So let me ask you this. Bullard, does he have any other? You had a safety a couple years ago. Shoot, why can I not remember his name? I really liked him, but he had the reputation, and it was well deserved, for really laying the wood on people. Who was that? Shoot, I can't remember his name. Safety at Georgia fans, LPC fans. I can't think of his name. He had a really funny, really short name. Anyway, I'll get to him at some point. I'll think of him. So does Javon Bullard have some kind of reputation? Because otherwise, I just think that's guys out there playing football. I don't have an issue with Javon Bullard. I don't even have an issue with. I'd have to go back and really study the play and the call and all of that. I think it's questionable. I think it could be called either way, but that has nothing to do with Javon Bullard. He's not an official.
Yeah, I mean, he led with his shoulder, so I don't really know what the problem is. And it was reviewed, and it was they made their assessment was that it wasn't targeting. So I don't really know. I mean, I don't know if do you want to play with 2-hand touch or flags or
yeah.
I mean,
well,
what
you do realize that this summer that the head of officiating came out and apologized to Ohio State and said that it was the wrong call.
Head of officiating for who?
The head of officiating for, I guess, the college football playoff, whomever was in charge of that, overseeing that particular game. I don't know if that was the head of officiating of who was it doing it? The Pac-12 maybe officiating that game, I think.
So you're saying the head of officiating for the Pac-12 came out and said that? Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
whoever the crew was that was responsible for that game.
Well, he was in the booth, wasn't he?
I don't know, but they screwed. And I'm just telling you what they reported.
Okay,
This
that's
isn't
the way
like hearsay. They actually said this. They actually came out with a statement that said,
okay.
they
Well,
got the play wrong.
we, you know what? We just need to just give that trophy back.
No, I'm not saying that.
we're
I'm
just
just telling
gonna
you facts. I'm just, the fact is that they made that statement. I'm not saying whether they made the right call on the field at the time or the wrong call when they made the statement. I'm just telling you that they made the statement.
I don't think that's right. I don't think that was said correctly. I think it was somebody who that was
No.
that was. I don't think that's right, Mark. I think that was somebody. Well, first of all, the Big Ten and the Pac, whatever they are now, they have a certain alliance right now. So that guy has no reason to not show preferential treatment to the Big Ten. So, this guy may want a job with the Big Ten eventually. So I'm giving this conspiracy theory back to the Ohio State people, because the Ohio State people always say the reason why I wasn't targeting is because the SEC is now part of the ESPN, and ESPN controls the playoff, and so that's why I wasn't targeting. So I'll give all these theories back to my Ohio State friends on this chat. So two can play that game.
Yeah, I'm not trying to play a game. I'm just bringing up that there was a comment made in the chat, so I posted that. I've defended Javon Bullard because I don't know. I don't think he was doing anything wrong. He basically just made a hit that could have been called targeting or unnecessary roughness. It was not. I'm okay with that decision. I'd have to go back again and look at it because it's been 8 months since I've looked at it. But was just adding to the conversation by letting you know that statement was made sometime around Big Ten Media Days.
Yeah, Big Ten Media Days. It's so convenient that would come out at Big Ten Media Days. I mean, don't you see the bias in that? This guy probably wants a job with the Big Ten. Can you not see that? He's the head of officials for a conference that has been decimated. So
well, first of all, I don't know that he's the head of the officiating of the Pac-12.
Well, that's what you said, Mark.
No, I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
I said he could have been because no. Porter, don't do what a lot of people do and take things when I said, was it a Pac-12 officiating crew? I think he was the head of the Pac-12. That's what I said. I don't know who officiated the game. I don't remember. I know it was another conference, obviously. And off the top of my head, I said it might have been the Pac-12. And therefore, it was the head of their officiating crew. If it was the Pac-12. I don't know who officiated the game.
Okay, that was my original point. Is I'm not so sure that the entity that you're talking about, this guy was the head of that entity. So anyway, let's move on. I don't want to get bogged out of that.
I got you. Yeah.
So,
Hummus Hero saying that Bullard's classless because apparently he signed a photo that said night bragging about taking cheap shots. But that's, I don't know.
Yeah, he did. I think it was a photograph. The guy had to take it down because he didn't have the rights to the photograph. But
and also, what is deemed classless at 20 years old versus at 50 years old, or sometimes two different things. I know that I've done things at 20 years old that I wouldn't do now.
Yeah,
done and said things. So,
well, anyway, I laugh when I just don't understand how Ohio State people who got probably the most lucky flag in the history of college football against Miami in the Fiesta Bowl can go back and turn around and complain about officiating.
Well, that was in no way well, I don't know what the two have to do with each other. They're 22 years apart, for one thing. Half the people that are arguing the game last January weren't around to watch that other game.
Well, I know, but you can love the fact that an official made this call, which most people in America thought was a ridiculous call. I guess I'm trying to say, you live by the sword, you die by the
Understand,
sword.
Porter, I think we both know that most people that make judgments on these college football games don't know what they're talking about. They don't know. Like, if anybody has taken in that game from start to finish, they know that there were a lot of bad calls against Ohio State in that game.
But
so people don't understand context. They always zero in on one play, one thing that happened, and then they take that to the bank without having knowledge of the entirety of the situation. That's what always happens. And it's groupthink. People basically just repeat what everybody else says. And so tons of people that go off on that play probably haven't even seen that play.
But I guess the thing that gets me is Ohio State's, they're the first fans that will complain about officiating. I mean, it even goes back to the Clemson game a few years back. Yeah. They'll go back to that. They'll go back to the Georgia game, and they'll complain about officiating. I'm thinking, dude, you got one of the biggest breaks in the history of college football.
I don't see why it was a break when it was a correct call.
How was it a correct call? The Miami fans were already the Miami players were already celebrating. Fireworks were going off. They were throwing their helmets up in the air. It was over.
Porter, you're confusing the timing of the call with the correctness of the call. Those are two entirely different things. Just because the call was late doesn't mean it was not the correct call. I believe it should have been called defensive holding, which has the same result. It wasn't pass interference. It was holding. He grabbed him by the jersey and had him with both hands on his shoulders. He was holding him.
Well, I didn't see that, but I guess my point is just chalk that up as that's just the football gods. I mean, you're not always going to get the calls, and the fact that you got that call, which was a late call, that a lot of people disagree with, just chalk that up as, and that's just the breaks.
Yeah, that's an obvious statement there. That doesn't mean you can't complain about bad calls or what you consider to be bad calls.
Well, I told you after the Georgia Ohio State game last year, I said I like Ohio State. I like they are a class program. I have nothing against Ohio State, but the way their fans have acted in the offseason have really soured me on that fan base. And the fact that they can't get over that one play, which had to go to review, the fact that they can't get over that just really, I don't know. I just, like I said, it's really soured me on that fan base. I just can't believe what crybabies they are.
I completely understand your viewpoint because your team won the national championship fair and square. And by complaining about a call, by interpretation, by connecting the dots, basically saying we would have won the national championship instead of you. So I understand your point. I also understand that as fans, there is a right to, if you deem a call to be incorrect, and then we don't know what would have happened in the game. We have no idea. But it's much tougher to come back from 3 scores down than 2 scores down. We know that it was a key call in the game. And to me, it was a questionable call. It was a highly questionable call. Now, when I say questionable, don't confuse that with wrong call. That means questionable call. It could have gone either way.
Yep.
But teams need to overcome those things.
Yeah, I agree.
And Ohio State had injuries. Georgia had injuries. key injuries.
Yeah, Leonard. Yeah, our
Yeah.
our tight end was out of the game. So
Yeah.
Um,
And our tight end was out of the game too. So there you go.
well, I think you're right. I think you're right in your prediction. I think we are going to drop a regular season game. I don't, and the way I do my predictions is just like how you do your predictions. I say I don't like to name the game. I just like to just say they're going to drop one of them because I don't know which one it's going to be, but I do agree that we'll drop one. We can't go three straight years of winning, of being undefeated in the regular season. I mean, that's just unheard of.
If you look at the schedule, it seems like you will. Like that's going to be a pretty monumental upset when they do lose. Okay, they could go to Tennessee. What are the most likely games? Well, it's the Tennessee game, South Carolina, Kentucky. Where's that game? On the road?
I think the Auburn game is going to be big.
Okay, the Auburn game.
Because you know how streaky of a program Auburn is. You know your college football. Auburn, I'll give you a great example. Auburn went winless in the SEC in 2012, fired their coach, and the next year they played for the national championship. That is the most schizophrenic program, at least in the South, maybe in the country, is Auburn. And they are a momentum program too. Once they get rolling, and they have a really loud stadium. So that's going to be a big test for us on the road, I think. Now, the thing that I like about Auburn is that they really don't have a dynamic quarterback. Thorne is not that guy. He's not that.
No.
It seems like the quarterbacks that beat Georgia are the dynamic quarterbacks, and he's not that kind of a quarterback. Although they did lose to what did you think of Stidham back in 2017? He wasn't a tremendous quarterback. He's pretty good. So that's the last quarterback I can think of they lost to. Well, probably him, and they lost to Texas in the Sugar Bowl to
Sam Ehlinger.
Yeah, Ehlinger. But those are the two that I'm thinking about that just really weren't great quarterbacks, but somehow were able to get a win against Georgia.
Yeah, and the South Carolina quarterback that beat Jake Fromm, who that would have been Ryan Helinski.
Well, no, he didn't make it through the game.
Okay. Well, whoever the backup was.
Yeah. So yeah,
He
that's
didn't make it through the game?
No, they had some backup in by the end of the game.
Okay. That was what, 2019?
Yep, that's the last home game we dropped, 2019. So, all right, man. Listen, I don't want to stay on here too long, but in fact, I need to go do a little exercising. So, but enjoy the talk and enjoy the games this weekend.
All right, Porter. Good to hear from you.
Thanks. Bye.
Have a good night.
Bye.
All right. I am curious to see what name I'm going to remember again from that game against South Carolina. Oh, yes, he's right. So, yeah, Ryan Helinski went 15 of 20, threw a touchdown pass in that upset at Georgia. And then Dakarian Joyner, I'm not saying that correctly, but I remember he was one of the 4 quarterbacks that started games for Shane Beamer. What was Shane Beamer's first season? 2021. So 2 years later, he was one of the many starting quarterbacks. Shane Beamer's first year, they had 12 games and they started 4 different quarterbacks, 3 games each, and he was one of them. Okay, he finished the game. They didn't need much out of him. 6 for 12. Rico Dowdle, always fun to look back at names from 4 or 5 years ago. This seems like it was forever ago, and it was 2019. It wasn't even 4 years ago. DeAndre Swift, Zamir White, James Cook. Of course, Jake Fromm had the two pick sixes, right? He had one pick six for sure. Was it 1, 2, 3 picks for Jake Fromm, 28 of 51, 295. George Pickens had a big day. All right, good stuff. That was back when we thought, or some thought, not me, some thought Kirby Smart would never win a big game. Is Carson Beck ready for prime time? Most likely, yes, he is. Mike, thank you so much for subbing. Even though Mike hates, just deplores the SEC, Mike has subbed the SEC. Even though I challenged one of Mike's earlier statements, Mike is a good guy. See, Mike has shown tonight and at other times that even though I challenge some of his statements, he can say, hey, this is part of the fun. This is the debate. And he still locks it in at the Voice of College Football, and bam, subs to the SEC channel. So please do the same. Even if you don't like the SEC, if you hate the SEC, but you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football and you're supporting what we do, please subscribe to the SEC channel. The link is in the description section of all the videos. Every video that we do, the link is in the description section. So all of our SEC channels as of September 1st are going away. There's SG1 sports content there if you would like that. And our content, Voice of College Football content, on the SEC channel. And of course, we'll do SEC content here on the national channel as well. All right, folks, appreciate you being here tonight at the Voice of College Football. Let's get it revved up on a Friday night with our Big Ten predictions, and we will see you then.